Hi, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Thrive and Survive Research Hub. Got my co-host Tineiwo with me today. T, how are you feeling?
Lovely, Alex. Feeling great. I mean, it's raining outside by my house, but feeling really good, eh? And yourself, how are you feeling?
Nah, I'm feeling very good. I had a good start to the week today. I just want to say this episode is after Drickus won the UFC middleweight belt. So if any South Africans listening, we had to push this episode back just to watch that watch that fight live.
100%. It was
Yeah.
crazy.
That was amazing. It was amazing. But yeah, I think what we're going to do today is I'll start with a point that I want to discuss, and then I'll take your input into it. But I was thinking last week about this concept of expanding your territory. And the reason why I use the phrase expanding your territory is because I'm a little bit of a history buff, a little bit of a nerd, and I like to think about things from the perspective of like an emperor who's building his empire. And when I look at the great emperors of the past, whenever you're building an empire, you focus on expanding your base and building your capital up as much as you possibly can. And I think in life, that's something that we can do ourselves in terms of expanding our experience of the world. So last week we spoke about this a little bit, you and me. The world is such a huge place, but your comprehension of it is limited to your experience of it. So whilst the world can be huge, if you don't ever go out and explore it and see it, you know, for all you know, it's not even that big. So the idea of expanding your territory came to me where I was thinking, let me become more familiar with my neighborhood. Let me become more familiar with my city and with my province because I realized how little I knew about the world. And I think it's interesting to speak to you about this because I know you've traveled a lot, you've lived overseas. Throughout the years that I've known you, I always find you in a different place. I mean, so I'm quite curious for you as somebody who has, explored and expanded, what kind of impact did that have on your life and on you as an individual?
That's an amazing question, Alex. And I mean, to introduce, my short answer to that, the more you see, the more you know, right?
Hmm.
And the reality when it comes to the more you know is you got to start with the immediate territory around you, because that allows for you to compare accurately when you go out there and learn about the world. So for me, obviously growing up, having the privilege of being exposed to Africa through my parents, and through my background in terms of where I come from, I really got a good understanding of home. And when I got the good understanding of home being my territory, I was then able to go out into the world, into Europe, into Asia, and understand that territory a little bit better.
Hmm.
And, you know, for me, the value that is added into my life through taking that approach, obviously not due to my own doing, was it wasn't, oh, Europe is better than Africa, Asia is better than Africa.
Hmm.
It was, some aspects of Europe and Asia are better than Africa. However, there are some aspects of Africa that are better than Europe. So through this experience, I was able to accurately judge, which places were best for what. And through understanding my territory and territory that was not mine, was able to define where I want to mark and build my territory.
Hmm.
And through that experience, decided to come home because I felt that I had a good understanding of the lay of the land here in comparison to there. And even with my good understanding of Europe and Asia, felt that my current capabilities and skills would be more profitable here. And to go on to your next question about territory, I think if you look at all the conquerors, from dating back to the Roman times, they first conquered what was around them
Yeah.
and then expanded out. And I think the world today, because of globalization, jumping on a plane and within less than 24 hours in America, people tend to want to do it the other way around. I'm not saying that it's impossible,
Sure.
right? But the reality is that there's something called home ground advantage.
Yeah.
And that is what I believe in based on my life's journey.
Mm.
So the importance of territory for me is in the foundation of your territory. And if you first build at home, provided that the environment is good enough, you're then able to expand your territory from a property perspective, from a land perspective, from an influence perspective, and
Yeah.
all those other areas of life, if you can do it well in your home country or your
100%.
homeland,
Yeah.
provided that your homeland allows for the opportunity to do so.
Yeah. For sure.
So yeah, that's just my take on it. Obviously, it's different. Some people come from war-stricken countries.
Yeah.
I mean, my original descent is Zimbabwean.
Yeah.
You know, the economic situation at the time when I was born wasn't good enough, so my parents came here. But my reference of home is I just call it Africa because I don't believe in borders,
Sure.
and I've
Exactly.
decided to expand my territory here
Yeah.
before I expand it anywhere else.
I
And
love
what
that.
are your thoughts on territory?
Do you know what's really cool is like I heard this quote, I'm gonna paraphrase it, but essentially it's like the quote says, When you travel the world and you return home, you see it for the first time as it truly was." And I think that is one of the good things about travel, is that it challenges your perspectives and it expands your understanding of the world, right? And so when
Yeah,
you come home, you see all the virtues and maybe all of the flaws that you didn't really notice the first time because it was just all you knew, right? But I look at territory as also as like your comfort zone. So when you expand your territory, you expand what you're familiar with, whether it's going to a different gym that you normally go to and interacting with people that you wouldn't have interacted with ordinarily, or like for me, it's a small thing, but like I realized at the office that I work at, because I work remotely, I go in occasionally, but there was a coffee shop there that I had never gone to. And I'm like reaching the 1 year anniversary of me working at this company. And I went for the first time last week just because I was like, I'm expanding my territory. Let me go to this coffee shop. And I got to know the owner of the shop and like I spoke to them. And that's another friend now that I made, just because I decided to go to a different place. And I went to a different gym that I normally go to last week. Same thing, building a different network, meeting different people. And a part of that is also just a pursuit of growth for me as a person. So that's what I look at expanding your territory. For me, I was born in Joburg. I lived here. When I finished school, I went and I studied in Stellenbosch in the Cape. I didn't know anybody when I went there. Spent 4 years there. And then when I graduated there, and most of my class that I was graduating from decided to stay in Cape Town, I came back to Joburg, where I felt like, again, it was this blank canvas and this new territory for me to become familiar with. So I guess both physically and metaphorically, expanding your territory is just expanding what you're familiar with. And I think that's a pretty worthy pursuit for a person in life, in any field, whether you're learning a new skill. Speaking from a chartered accountant's perspective, I noticed a lot of people that I worked with stayed in audit or they stayed in finance because that is what they know. And I understand that. But as somebody who, and immediately after I finished my articles, I went into a non-financial role. It was so good for me because it humbled me as well to be like, oh, geez, okay. I'm coming from this environment where I know everything, I'm familiar with everything, and now I go here and I don't know anything. And now I have to
100%.
I have to rely on principles more than technical skill, which is, I think, very useful for a person in life. So yeah, that's my thoughts on expanding your territory. I think every day just
Yeah.
doing something a little bit differently
Yeah.
is very useful.
And to add on to that, when it comes to expanding your territory, I think when you expand your territory or start to do things that you're not familiar with, you also start to understand what you have, and you also start to understand where you come from, right? And through that understanding, are able to make better decisions and judgment with regards to what you want to do in the future and where you want to further expand your territory. So I think it's an essential part of life. But like I said, if you skip the step of understanding
Home
your
base.
own environment, right? And I'll use someone like Elon Musk, right? Before he decided to go overseas to America, he didn't only just leave because of one thing, but he looked at every single data point that he could find to justify the fact that this territory that he was in
Mm,
was not conducive enough for him to build what he wanted to build based on what was happening in South Africa,
sure.
and therefore made a good decision. So I think the study of your territory, the good study of your territory, allows for you to go out there and then make better judgments as to where you should expand and justify your decision in going into unfamiliar territory so you can grow.
And I
And that's where confidence comes from, right? As well.
yeah, yeah.
I know I'm doing the right
You
thing.
learn about yourself as well. Like
Yeah,
I'm sure when you traveled and you studied overseas and you were by yourself, you learned some things about yourself that you didn't know because you hadn't been challenged that way before.
yeah, yeah. And challenges, right? And one of the biggest benefits for me, I think for anyone, is the ability to relate to people from different backgrounds and to people from different cultures. And
Yeah.
also understanding that, you know, humans in different areas advance differently, you know? And one of the topics I'm going to speak about is race, right? Or the perception of Africa,
Yeah.
right? I always grew up, as soon as anyone said anything bad about Africa or uh, African people, I would quickly be defensive,
Mm,
But when I was exposed to another territory where I was able to grow, I ended up realizing that maybe in this circumstance, it's my duty to educate and show and change the person's perception. And in doing that, managed to establish lifelong friendships
cool.
and also got the innate ability to understand that a lot of it also came from ignorance. And I'm going to finish that off by saying today, if you look at the next 20 to 50 years, the next heat map of the world is Africa. Right? There's no company that doesn't have interest in Africa. There's no government that doesn't have interest in Africa. And there's no people who don't have interest in wanting to know people in Africa.
Sure.
And we're fortunate to be within this environment and we need to harness that. And when you do expand your territory, yes, outside is great. But I think we have it all. We just have to be tough enough to really pursue and live for something bigger than ourselves.
I love that point. And I think it just to like add one thing before we roll off on that, but expanding your territory, just to reiterate, it doesn't necessarily mean traveling to a different city or traveling, like getting to know your home base. Like most people think, okay, that person on the other side of the world that speaks a different language from me is so interesting, but they don't even know their neighbors. And you don't even know how fascinating the person living next to you is and how just speaking to them can change your whole perspective on life. And
Yeah,
then we talk about getting to know your city better, like finding all of the things there that makes it so special and so unique. You can live in a city for 10 years and not know it, you know?
yeah,
So
100%.
yeah, that I agree with you. Like before you go and explore somewhere else, maybe figure out what's lying around you.
Yeah, 100%.
Um,
100%.
I have another question which I think would be interesting to discuss. So, I was thinking in life, you want to maximize the number of outstanding days that you have and minimize the number of subpar days that you have. And everyone's definition of outstanding and not outstanding is subjective. But basically, a life well lived is a life that you maximized what you wanted from it, right? So it led me to think, okay, how do you create an outstanding day? Like, what is the formula? What is the recipe? And I'm
Mhm.
curious, like, if you have a a formula that you try and live by to make the most of your days. Like, what is your approach to making it
Yeah,
your outstanding day?
yeah. So, I mean, for me, obviously, I think a lot of people tell me that I'm overly optimistic,
Same.
but the reality is that I've been overly optimistic for a very long time. And
Yeah.
it's gotten to a point where it's now part of my being.
Mm.
But I mean, where that stems from is the fact that every morning I wake up, I give myself the instruction that today is going to be a good day.
Yeah.
And when you give yourself an instruction, you are the commander of your soul. You are the God. God is within you. You are the God of yourself. So if you don't exercise the power of the ability to be God to yourself, then what are you going to control?
Mm-hmm.
So for me, that's the basic foundation that I start my day on every single day. I wake up in the morning, tell myself it's going to be a good day. I feel my feet touch the ground. I thank God for life. And I think when you focus on the granular things of life, anything extra is a bonus.
Yeah.
And through that, I tend just to have a good day all the time. So when the bigger things come, I say, well, that happened, but thank God I'm alive. And I've just done that over the years, so much, so long, and so much that almost nothing can phase me. I'm not saying I'm immune to being sad and angry and those type of stuff, but I also think about those type of stuff. I also think about worst case scenarios, pre-prep myself, because this is life at the end of the day. It's not a fairy tale. And I think if you can focus on both being thankful and counting your blessings and also acknowledging the fact that things can go wrong, be able to navigate both days accordingly, but understand that you are the God and the commander of your soul. And therefore, it is your job and your duty to make sure that you appreciate life and go through it in the most optimistic way possible. Easier said than done, but that is what I've been doing, and it's worked. And I'm not saying it's going to continue to work forever,
Sure.
but it's working for me now, and I'm going to continue to do so until proven wrong. What is your approach? I'd be very interesting to know how you command your day to be a good day, and how do you consistently make sure you remain in this overly optimistic mood you're always in.
I feel like overly optimistic is subjective, eh? If you ask me, I'm just the right amount of optimistic.
Well said.
But I think something that you said there that I agree with is it's setting that intention, being intentional about the way you want to think about your day. Tony Robbins, the life coach, talks a lot about it's not what happens to us, it's the meaning that we give it that dictates how we feel about something. And
Yeah,
you can bottle that your whole experience of life down to that phrase, essentially. It's the meaning that you give to things. So life is not happening to you, it's happening for you. When something is challenging, you look at it as an opportunity to grow. You don't say this is, and obviously we're all human, and I think the big thing is negative emotion. How long do you stay there? Like what Tony also uses a phrase, what's your emotional home? So for you and me, we're setting this intent to make our emotional home optimism and gratitude, right? Whereas for some other people, their emotional home is fear, anxiety, anger, frustration, and they experience momentary positive emotion, but they come back to this base of frustration. Whereas for us, it's the other way around. We have momentary frustration and momentary disappointment and those things, but we try and come back to that home of gratitude and optimism.
yeah,
So,
yeah.
um, I'm curious, like, what was your inspiration behind adopting that mentality? Was that something that you found with your family, or was it something you picked up along the way from reading? Like, what was it for you?
Yeah. So for me, I mean, growing up, generally, I always tried to surround myself with positive people, purely because number one, I was pretty good at sport, but always had a small frame, right? And
Mm,
uh, I always needed to kind of convince myself that my physical structure would not limit me in terms of being the fastest runner, playing on a rugby field with guys triple my size. And the people I surrounded myself with almost like flipped my switch to make me believe that what I think is real.
mm,
So once that switch flipped, I remained in that state ever since. So I attribute that to environment,
yeah.
being extremely cautious around the people I'm around, because to a certain extent, your environment can shape you, especially if it's a good environment. And today, generally, what I say most of the time happens, right? Um, not because I'm great or anything like that, but because the environments I choose to be in support where I want to go and what I want to do.
Yeah.
So yeah, for me, it was the power of environment and understanding that you're shaped by what is around you to a certain extent. And if you want to benefit from the power of environment, be in the good environments, be in the right environments, have the right energy charging. Because you can't beat environment also. You can be great and have the positive mentality forever, but be too long in the wrong environment. I don't have to explain the rest. So yeah, for me, that's been a big game changer in my life. And for you,
Oh,
I've been navigating.
you know what's crazy? It's so funny that you say that because I would, there's obviously a lot of things that reinforces that belief, right? But there was also a spark for me, like a turning point. And I talk about it a lot with my friends. When I was at school, I used to roll with a crowd that wasn't the greatest. And I became friends with a guy who I'm still friends with today. Um, Shout out to Jerry Yang. He's the man. But he was the coolest, like most humble, kindest, most genuine human being. Just golden retriever energy. If your golden retriever was a person, that would be him. I like to say,
Yeah,
if you dropped Jerry in Kenya with the Maasai tribes, he would come out of it as a friend, like a day
yeah,
later, without even speaking
yeah,
language, because
yeah,
the energy that he puts out is just so positive.
yeah,
And to me, he was like this inspiration and also like permission to be optimistic, you know? Um, and me and him, we broke out from the old group that we used to hang with, and it was just like, wow, like life can be like this. Oh my word, this is
yeah,
incredible.
yeah,
Could drop us in a prison and we would have a good time because that was just what it was like. And that was the spark for me that built that optimism. I reinforced it with everything. It's like they say, truth is not something that people come up with. It's discovered because it's there.
yeah,
And you read these books from all of these different authors that are all saying the same thing. And it's not that they're copying each other. It's that they discovered something that was around them. And whenever you discover it, you're like, holy shit, this is incredible. I need to tell everyone about this.
yeah,
You can find 10 books that are all best-selling books because they resonate and they essentially say the same thing. So,
yeah.
for example, as a man thinketh by, can't
James
remember.
Eden.
Yes. And The Strangest Secret, The Secret, all of these books are all talking about the power of positive thinking, essentially. And
Yeah, yeah,
what you think about all the time is what you are and what your life
yeah,
becomes. So when you
100%.
think optimistically the whole time, your life becomes optimistic. It's just how it
Yeah,
is because
yeah,
you see blessings, you see
yeah,
opportunities. So, but what you said about environment it's very interesting because
yeah,
I never thought of it that way. And it's amazing how it happened for both of us that the same way.
yeah. And if you think about it, right, like reality is not what you see. Reality is what you think you see to a
Oh,
certain extent,
yeah.
right? So you were speaking now about, as a man thinketh. I think, you know, as a man thinketh exactly what I've just described now. I'll speak about, we played at a nice golf course a couple of weeks ago with some friends of mine in Hatupia. It's called Peekaboo.
Hmm.
For me, that was one of my closest experiences to heaven. Just to give you an example, but for
Wow.
another guy I was playing with was just a dead average day. It was just a dead average course,
Uh,
right? But I love nature. My association of heaven is trees,
mm,
God, the Garden of Eden, and things like that. So I had that experience because of what I think of trees and grass and a beautiful day and beautiful weather.
yeah.
And therefore my experience was that in comparison to him, his perception of what I was seeing was completely different. And that's why I say reality is not what you see, it's what you think.
Oh, what's amazing about that is like you've just spoken about the concept of philosophy and wisdom so well. And it speaks to the metaphor of, or the story of Plato's allegory of the cave, which I've
Yeah.
spoken about before. But for those of you that don't know, it's essentially Plato spoke about philosophy, and he said, we're born um, living in a cave, facing the cave wall, watching the shadows dance on the wall, and we think that's reality. And the
Mm.
study of philosophy is to break free from the chains that keep you in the cave, walk out of the cave, and look out into the world and see it for how it actually is.
Yeah.
And like you said there, the meaning that you gave that golf course, it
Yeah.
transcended the basic percent.
Period.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. That's amazing. That's
Yeah.
so cool. And
And now,
yeah, sorry. Go.
go ahead.
I just wanted to say, I think it's wise to try and reinforce that as much as possible each and every day of your life because your emotional experience of a day is your life.
Yeah.
And I'm not talking about your peak experiences of like birthdays, weddings, shit like that. I'm talking about your day to day. That is your life. And so
Yeah.
getting that right is super important. Um, if you are most people are living Monday to Friday shit, not enjoying it. Saturday and Sunday, amazing, and that's their life. It doesn't have to be that way. And a lot of people might find that hard to believe, but it's about lifestyle design.
Yeah.
It's a concept that Tim Ferriss introduced in his book, The 4 Hour Workweek, but basically designing the kind of life that you would want to live.
Yeah.
Uh, and I'm not talking
Yeah.
about yachts and models and champagne, but I'm talking about, if it's important to you to speak to your family, why don't you call them every day? That's
Yeah.
something that you can do, you know?
100%. 100%. And I
Um,
mean, I like what you said there about lifestyle design, right? To go back to what we initially spoke about when we started this episode, you can elevate your experience of life
mm,
by elevating the quality of your thoughts.
yeah, yeah,
It's a byproduct. You
yeah,
experience life better when your thoughts are more elevated. And like, I mean, I was recently in Zimbabwe, and I mean, I always try my best to interact with like, especially like street kids, homeless people,
yeah,
and when you interact with them and you see them having enough, um, you see them, less fortunate in comparison to us. But have a conversation with them. How's your day? I mean, those guys can sometimes get you in a better mood than most of us who are sitting in offices and big homes can,
yeah,
you know? And that's where you realize that reality is not what is around you, what you touch, what you see. It's what's in your head. That is reality.
100%. Yeah, and you can go down a whole rabbit hole with that
Yeah,
topic.
100%.
But
100%.
yeah, I mean, there's a quote that I wanted to share that's relevant to this topic, which is one of my favorite quotes. It's a very simple quote, by a guy called Naval Ravikant, who I've spoken about many times. But the quote is, "A fit body, a calm mind, a house full of love. These things cannot be bought; they must be earned." And I think that is such a great concept of like building an outstanding life. It's like if you can every day try and work on your body, you know, do some exercise, get healthy, calm your mind, meditate, pray, read something that soothes your soul, and work on your relationships, your
Mm.
family, your friends. Something that I'm pretty passionate about is I feel like I know this. You should treat your family better than you treat strangers. But too often, it's the other way around, where we treat the people that we don't know a certain way because they're unfamiliar or because they're temporary. And we treat the people closest to us poorly because we think, well, they're not going anywhere. And the little micro irritations and frustrations accumulate over time, and you just take them for granted. But you should treat your family and your friends better than strangers. Not saying you should treat strangers poorly, but family and friends, treat them well. Um, so
So
yeah.
well said. So well said. And I mean, just to add on there, what I want to share with you, when I was in China, the city I went to at that time had very little foreigners. It was called Suzhou.
Yeah.
And the university assigned a buddy to me. So it was a Chinese guy who could speak English. And I learned a lot from him. And one of the things that I hold my heart that I learned from him was a statement that went by: celebrate everything, everyone close to you, and every moment, good or bad.
Mm.
And through that, you'll find eternal happiness, you know? And I practice it, and I do it every day. And like, I mean, no day is bad enough for me to not be grateful for life, because the basic foundation that you need to celebrate is everything, starting off with the air that you breathe in the morning and the fact that you can walk and your feet can touch the ground and you can feel it.
I love that.
So yeah, I liked how you wrapped up that topic, because I think to enjoy more, you need to enjoy the basic stuff, and that starts off with yourself and those closest to you.
100%.
I have a question for you.
Yeah, please. I was about to hand over to you anyway. So yeah.
I'd like to touch on the subject of humility, you know? And the question I want to ask you is, how does one become humble? Because being humble is not a natural thing. It is intentional. It is highly intentional.
Yeah.
And my question to you is, how does someone become humble?
I could definitely speak on this. Uh, you either do it the hard way or the harder way. Uh, the hard way is you humble yourself. The harder way, the world will humble you. And I really believe that because
Well done, well said, Buti.
every time in life that I've gotten too big for my shoes, the world has humbled me. And I find myself flat on my face and I'm like, oh, Jesus, what am I doing? I have a quote that I try and live by, and it's confident enough to try, but humble enough to learn. And I think that's a great goal for people to strive for because true confidence is not arrogant. True confidence is being grounded. It's giving yourself permission to try, even if you're going to fail. It's having conviction in yourself and belief in your your judgment. But humility is recognizing that you are so limited, you have so many flaws, and there's things that you're not doing well that you don't even know just because you're not there to pay attention to. And yeah, humility is just self-awareness, I think. And like
Yeah,
just paying attention to how great people are. Like you can learn something from everybody, even if it's not what to do. You can learn, you know.
100%, 100%,
In yourself,
100%.
I would say, can I just say, I think you are one of the most humble people I've ever met in my life, considering like how talented you are, how smart you are, how charismatic you are. Like you're a very humble guy. So I'm curious, how do you find humility? Like what was your journey on
Yeah.
that?
Well, thank you. I didn't know that. Thanks for the compliment. And I mean, I feel you and your whole family are so humble that it inspires me to always remain grounded, right? And for me, and I could speak forever on humility, but I'd just like to share one practice that I do almost on a weekly basis that helps me stay grounded. And, you know, being humble is an exercise and it's intentional, like I said to you. And one of the things that I also learned in China was how you treat the bathroom, especially the toilet. So in your workspace, there's someone who cleans the toilet every day.
Yeah,
And how I started practicing humility is firstly putting myself in that person's shoes. And secondly, I have a daily practice of leaving any public toilet I use better than I found it.
it's a great
As
one.
crazy as this sounds, if I get into a bathroom and there's pee on the toilet seat, I will take the sanitizer and the
Yeah,
tissue
yeah,
and I'll wipe it. I'll pick up the seat and do my business and leave.
that's a great
And
one.
that just keeps me so grounded
Yeah,
in life, because that could have been me. I could have been the cleaner.
Yeah,
It's just a matter of chance that I'm not the cleaner, you know. But I acknowledge the fact that I'm blessed to be in the position that I am in, and someone else is going to come and clean this up. So I will do my part
hmm,
in this humbling execution of a task to leave it a better place. And I do that every single week, if not every single day, because those are the people that keep life going. And I said, I could have been them.
that's amazing. That's
And
amazing.
it's tough and it's not easy. It's disgusting. But someone else does that for a living.
Yeah,
And it is those type of tasks that I like to challenge myself, um, to lower myself and understand that I am just a human, like the same way who's gonna come, same person who's gonna come in and clean up this mess. So yeah, quite crazy. Learned it from China, and I think that's why the Chinese happen to be amongst the most humble race if you look at them collectively.
sure.
Um, and yeah, there's a lot of lessons to learn from their culture around being grounded and not braggadocious. Yes, there's some of them who are, not to box everyone in,
Yeah.
but if I could group it, it's not every day you can come across a very braggadocious uh, Chinese or Asian person.
Yeah. And you know, that's like the value of travel, right? I mean, you expand your consciousness, you see different ways of living. Um, Two things I also want to highlight there. So yeah, one, I would also say environment, like you spoke about earlier, makes you humble as well. It helps a lot to
Yeah,
have humble people around you, and I have very
yeah,
humble people around me, which helps a lot.
yeah,
And then two is also, I feel like from an intellectual perspective, if you're just paying attention, you will be humble because you see so many things that can humble you. Just like,
yeah,
you know, you pointed out there how fortunate a person is to not be in the situation where that's what you have to do to make money for a living. You think about not getting injured, you're like, it's a miracle that you didn't find yourself in a car accident. You're not blind,
yeah,
deaf,
yeah,
you have all your digits,
yeah,
like a mind that is capable of comprehending somewhat complex
yeah,
concepts.
yeah,
All of these things had to go right to be where we are
yeah,
today. And
100%.
you know, I think it's good, it's worth it to say in this pod, like, you know, when we're speaking about these concepts, we're definitely not trying to tell anybody else what to do or what to think. It's just us trying to figure these things out for ourselves and to try and be
100%.
and to be like, okay, if I'm saying to you, be humble, I'm saying to myself, Alex, be humble. You know,
Yeah. Yeah,
I'm
exactly.
not
Exactly.
saying
So we'll see.
everybody, hey world, be humble because I'm so
Yeah.
humble. Be like me.
Yeah.
And that's just common sense. That's just having a little bit of self-awareness. Be like, you know what? The world is there just saying, check yourself, dude. Chill.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
all the stuff you're doing doesn't really matter. You can be
Yeah.
Michael Jordan, Elon Musk. Doesn't matter, dude. Who
Yeah.
cares? So
100%.
what? You're the richest person in the world. You still shit like everybody else.
Yeah.
Sorry, but it's the truth.
Yeah.
So,
And I think that's well said, right? And I mean, to gather what you've just said, right? Like humility also inherently comes through serving others, community service. And I think that's why, you know, people visit orphanages, you know, charities. I mean, there's one guy, one of my neighbors used to be one of the former ambassadors. I won't name which country, but it's a European country. Every day he wakes up in the morning, he walks up the 3 roads following us, he picks up all the papers and comes back home and he puts them in his dustbin.
amazing.
Community service.
Amazing.
Not much older than myself, but that's his exercise of staying grounded and understanding that he's just human like everyone else. So I like how you wrapped that up and how you just, you know, spoke about the fact that we're all the same. No one's different. And if you can do ordinary tasks, even as a great person, then you're more likely to stay humble as you go through life.
You know, I like not to divert too much, but it is relevant to this. I'm not sure if you're familiar with the rapper Logic. Logic.
Yes,
But
yes,
he
yes,
has
yes. I love it.
I enjoy his music quite a bit, and he has this
Yeah,
album. I can't remember what it's called. I think it's called The Incredible Story, where he has Neil deGrasse Tyson doing skits on the album. And it's quite cool because in the album he like dies, and now Neil deGrasse Tyson is speaking to him as God, and he plays around with the themes of reincarnation, right? And in the album, he speaks about how in this like this metaphorical world that he's creating for us, um, we are all the same person, just living different lives in cycles, again and again and again. And with each life, when you become reincarnated, you expand your consciousness, and that was kind of the purpose in this metaphorical world that he's building of like humanity and life. It's like each planet has a species and where it's one person that just lives again and again. And that, I mean, I'm not saying I believe in that, but I'm just saying what a cool concept to think about humanity in that way. And what a great way of getting over the bullshit differences that like supposedly separates us from each other. We have
Yeah,
a lot more in common
yeah,
than we have that keeps us apart.
100%, 100%.
Humbling thought.
Wow, wow, wow. And just to reiterate, right, everything we're speaking about here is what we think
Yeah.
and what we believe.
Yep.
And these discussions I had for the purpose of us figuring out how we can better ourselves and through these conversations, better others who are listening to us chat.
100%.
So yeah, I really appreciate these conversations. And I mean, even in today's conversation, something that I believed, I no longer believe because of your perception of humanity, right? And I think
Yeah.
that's what these conversations are about, building each other and building anyone who's listening. And you take what you want, reject what you don't want.
Yep.
But it's just a platform for us to share and discuss things openly to build each other.
Yeah. Look, at an idea can change your life. It can change everything. So you never
Yeah,
know where you're gonna find gold. Hope you guys will
100%.
find it here.
Yeah, exactly, exactly.
Fine.
So
Okay.
yeah,
I think I've worked through everything on my side. Do you have any other questions that you want to address?
yep. So last one on my side, obviously nice and concise, is pets. I'm going to speak about pets. I know that I'll be speaking about relationships.
Yeah.
You know, how important is it for someone to have a pet? And according to your understanding of any relationships you've had with pets?
Well, I'm biased because I've had pets my whole life, but I would say it's very important. I feel like there's lessons, but there's also memories and experiences. And you just, your, the lens with which you view your life shifts when you have a pet by your side. And a pet is so many things. A pet is like a child, a pet is like a friend, a pet is like a student, you know. I think especially for kids, it's really good because it teaches them responsibility and
Mm.
it teaches them interpersonal relationships. Because especially with dogs, like I'm biased because I love dogs, but in my view, if a dog is afraid of a person, it says something about that person, or it says something about the trauma that that dog has experienced prior to that event. Because when you are with a dog, all they want is you to just be nice to them. If you are nice, they will worship you. If
Yeah,
you are not nice, they'll be afraid of you or they'll be aggressive.
yeah,
So
yeah,
I think it's very important. But obviously, I also think your approach to having pets needs to be specific to you. If you are somebody who can't show a pet the time and attention that that pet deserves, better not to get it because you're going to create a problem that, the world doesn't need. Just because you want the
yeah,
perk and the benefits, like it's also about responsibility. So I'm a big fan of pets, and I know you are as well because you've got a great dog. But I'm curious about your perspective on it as well. So what's your take on having pets?
yeah, yeah. So for me, I mean, I think having pets, I'm not going to say it's compulsory to have a great life, but I think it elevates your overall experience of life
Mm.
because the relationship with a pet is one that no human being can do. And I think it's also one that is very spiritual because you learn to communicate differently. You also learn to be sensed and sense. That's what I like about dogs in specific, right? I observe my dog a lot and I take a lot of lessons from how dogs behave. When I get home, it observes me, it then adjusts itself to uplift my mood. And through that, we then have a better relationship, a better day, end up tapping him. And I take those lessons and I apply them in my own personal life with my friends and family by first being the observer, analyzing the situation, and then seeing how I can accommodate that person so that we can get to a point where we can connect.
Mm.
So for me as an adult, that's been the real value of having, pets. And yeah, everyone has different reasons. Initially, I got in my dog for security purposes, as selfish as that may sound, you know. Um, but as I got more time with it, I realized that this is a very selfish reason to have a pet. And yeah, harness it and take advantage of this 10, 12-year relationship you'll have with it. So yeah, your reasoning is very, very interesting. I think it resonates with myself, and I'd encourage anyone to have either fish, cats, a dog. But I think it's experience that no human can give you.
Yeah,
Yeah, or an experience that you don't want to go to the grave without having.
no, for sure. And especially for kids, man. Like I say, for kids, it's like having an extra sibling, you know. It really shapes your childhood a certain way. So,
Yeah, yeah. Cool. That's it from my side, Alex. I think we can.
okay, sorry, it froze a little bit there, but I think you said we can wrap it up, which I'm aligned with. Um, I just want to say thank you so much for this episode, T. Thank you for sharing your wisdom. And to everyone that's listening, thank you for the time. We really, really, really appreciate it. And we are working very hard on our side to serve you guys as much as we can with the content that we make. So thank you very much.
Yep. And I mean, thanks to you, to Alex, and to anyone who's listening all the way to the end. I think it's always great to share knowledge and through this sort of authentic conversations that we have. And yeah, you've got a good head on your shoulders. So yeah, I'm very honored to have these type of conversations with you and be vulnerable on such a public, platform. So yeah, it's very makes me feel very grateful for life and a very humbling experience. So looking forward to many, many more of these type of conversations.
Well, it's easier to be vulnerable when there's only 200 people watching. We'll see when we've got millions.
Oh,
All right,
yeah,
everyone. Thank you so much.
cool.
See you next time.
Cheers.